Hello and welcome. Have you ever wondered who the nation's first black it girl was? You know, the first shot caller, the one who took care of her business, family, and made an impact on her community? Well, it brings me great honor today to introduce you to the nation's first black socialite. Welcome to another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. I'm your lecturer and social historian, Lady Trinette Wilson. Today, we're going to learn all about Josephine Beall Willson Bruce, the nation's first black socialite. Born during a great time of change in the United States, Josephine Wilson Bruce was born into a family of privilege. During this time, blacks were on the rise. The black elite or black 400 were being birthed into the season. It was October the 29th, 1853. The same day, the first red fire truck came into commission, drawn by horses. Black conventions were taking hold and black people were meeting together so that they could begin to take advantage of our country and the laws that are available to us. Even Frederick Douglass went to the black conventions. And even Solomon Northup, who had been 12 years a slave, was set free then. So in 1853, though the whole United States was not free, blacks were finding a place in the North where they were treated a little bit better. Of course, there was great discrimination and racism going on at that time. And that's what caused Josephine's family and her father to move from where she was born in Philadelphia to Cleveland in 1854 when she was only 1 years old. Her father, Dr. Joseph Wilson, was Cleveland's first black dentist. He was a dentist, so she grew up in a family that was well-to-do. Her mother, Elizabeth, was a homemaker. Some say she was a musician. But whatever the case, both she and her husband really thought it important for Josephine to be educated. So Josephine entered elementary school in Cleveland High at the Cleveland High School, and in 1871 she graduated. She continued on her education, though, even afterwards, receiving training class, finishing school, and teaching. So she entered the field of teaching. She actually was the first black school teacher in the Cleveland Independent School District. Now, at the same time she was learning how to be a teacher, she was also learning and spending time to learn how to grow socially and culturally, which really prepared her to become the socialite she would become later in life after her marriage to Senator Blanche Kelso Bruce, who became the first black senator to complete his term. Though Senator Bruce of Mississippi was the first black man to complete his full term, there were other black men in Congress at the time. So the world was really moving forward as far as black mobility, blacks moving up. And when he and Josephine got married, their union truly took their relationship and took their standing in the community to another level, but not without its challenges. In 1878, Blanche and Josephine wed. Blanche was a business owner at that time. He was a farm owner. So before he became a senator, he was already wealthy. So once they were married, they took a honeymoon, and not just any honeymoon. They took a 4-month honeymoon in Europe. They traveled, they dined with all the elite and the best. It seemed to be a very great starting ground for Josephine, who would become later on a socialite. So they went to the operas, the ballets, they toured the museums and the best galleries. And this trip would really lay the groundwork for who she would later on become as the wife of a senator. After her husband's election, Josephine hit the political social ground running. She was a member of the National Association of Colored People, which was the NAACP. She and other educators worked together to develop a program to help with the Black social uplift. So that was really something special that she did. She was also a member of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And during that time, one thing that really kind of hurt Josephine, and this problem still really does exist today, and that problem is colorism, and colorism on both sides. So Josephine was a mixed race woman. Her mother was Indian, her father was black. She felt sometimes outcast in the black community as well as in the white community. In the white community, they only accepted Josephine when it was an official event. After her husband was no longer senator, she didn't receive any more invitations for any political event. So her socialite life stopped once her husband was no longer in office. But before then, within the black community, she faced some trouble as well, because she and her husband didn't spend a lot of time building the black community. Most of the time, they were seen with well-to-do blacks, and they really did live an insulated life. And within those well-to-do blacks, oftentimes the people were mulatto. They were mixed race people, so they had an insular life, separate from the rest of what would have been considered then Black America. So she was considered elite. In fact, the newspapers often mistaked her for a Spanish woman because of how fair her skin was. But she was definitely known for her being fashionable and being a beautiful woman. In fact, the Washington Bee, which was a black newspaper during the time, noted that, quote, Miss Bruce pays and receives calls from those of her select set with unwavering regard for etiquette. So she was known for her etiquette. She was known for hobnobbing with people who were wealthy because she herself was wealthy. How wealthy, you may be asking? Well, they settled in Washington, D.C. When they were married. Of course, he was a senator. So, with all of that, they were one of the top 400 richest blacks in the whole United States. And they were ranked like number two. So they were worth $150,000 at that time. And if you looked at, say, 2022, that would be a little bit over $4 million. So that's how wealthy their family was. And because of their position, she was able to reach beyond the white organizations and began to use her voice for activism within the Black community, but mostly for women's rights and education. A member of many prominent Black women's organizations. One called the National Organization of Afro American Women, NACW. She actually wrote for them, and some of her writings can even still be found today. In 1879, following the merger of the National Congress of Colored Women and the National Association of Colored Women, she wrote an article about that. After one of the conventions, she wrote an article about that. So she was very active in women's organizations. She was also a member of the National Women's Suffrage Movement and Temperance Movement. So she was truly a voice within the community. Her movement and her activity after her husband passed even allowed doors to be opening for her for education when Booker T. Washington appointed her as principal of Tuskegee University. And they used to call her Lady Principal because of how elegant and how poised she was. So, Lady Bruce was truly an icon of fashion, of being a socialite, and truly being a light for African American women, even if sometimes she faced some rejection from her white social counterparts. The Black community, especially women's organizations, opened their arms to her and did accept her. Which brings me to the rest of her story. Though she was a great socialite and lived a wonderful life, in 1879, she and Blanche had a son. His name was Roscoe Coughlin Bruce. Mr. Bruce was highly educated, just like his parents. He graduated from Harvard University, and he actually became the head of the Tuskegee Academic Department, as well as the assistant superintendent in charge of the colored schools of District of Columbia. Now, in both of those positions, that's when the Bruce family began to experience their first setbacks. Roscoe was their son, and he was their only son. and he was a very bright-skinned man like his mother was. Unfortunately, in the Black community, we know about colorism, and it didn't just start yesterday. So Roscoe was a colorist. He thought he was better than others, and he did some things that brought shame down on his family. The courageous thing he did, in my opinion, was when he was the academic director for Tuskegee University. He allowed a Dutch researcher to take pictures of Black children's bodies without their parents' permission. So that was truly egregious, and he did get fired for that. But just when you think he was done, he wasn't. He did one last thing to really deplete the family's wealth as well as their reputation. Josephine still had wealth. She still had some influence amongst her elite friends. And one of her elite friends was the Rockefellers. And to help them and really to help Roscoe kind of get back on his feet, he allowed Roscoe to take over management of some of his properties. Now, Roscoe was doing good at first, but then unfortunately, he got caught up and he lied and he pretended like there was a break in. He faked a break in, which was later found out to be fake, and he was doing it for insurance purposes. So that broke that relationship and it further sullied their name and depleted their wealth. Despite Roscoe's shenanigans, the truth still remains. Josephine Beall Willson Bruce was a woman of honor who was the principal of Tuskegee University from 1899 to 1902, a woman who was married to the first senator who completed his term, who passed away in 1898 of diabetes complications. She managed his estate in great wealth until Roscoe, got into a little trouble and she had to use some of her money in order to help him, and which she did. However, it did deplete their wealth, and by her passing in 1923, she wasn't living as a miser, but she certainly was not living the glamorous life that she had when she was the wife of a senator. Lady Bruce passed away on February 15th, 1923, of a heart attack in Kimball, West Virginia. Their home has become a national monument. We really thank you for tuning in to find out all about Josephine Beall Willson Bruce, a real trailblazer and the first Black socialite in the United States. This has been another great episode of Royal, Black, and Elite. Now, if you want to learn about the first Black socialite in England, click the link and learn more about the Royal, the Black, and the Elite. Thank you for joining me. And remember, hit like, subscribe, and share. Thank you all.